Anna, what were
Yes.
your top 3 actions that you would say on your 150-point action plan that made a difference?
Ooh, I wasn't expecting that question. Top 3 actions. Not really focus on specific tasks, but being visible and trying to help the staff within the ward and departments make sense of the situation that we were in, particularly at the time. So maybe not have sort of top 3, but I think for me, the most important thing was at the time, we felt like there were barriers between ward staff and IPC colleagues, and we spent a lot of time sort of going around in our droves with our matrons in red, with us, with NHS England in our droves. It is how it felt, sort of inspecting these areas, and people just felt like they were being kicked while they were down. So I don't think, for me, it wasn't about focusing on tasks as such in terms of the actions, but it was around the overarching support to help the staff within the wards and departments understand the situation that we were in, so that they could help us with the actions and sort of spread the load. So not sure if that really answers your question, but that's sort of...
Was it practices or changing the environment? So you talked about refurbing wards.
Yes.
So presumably that your environment had, over the years,
it was very tired.
Yeah,
it was very tired, particularly within our spinal injuries unit, because it never closed. No. So access to those areas was really, really, really difficult. So trying to coordinate that with the complex group of patients that we had was really, really difficult. And it's unfortunate that it took these events for that to happen. But in a way, it was one of the best things that ever happened to us, because we're in such a better place now. It is just unfortunate that it took 3 outbreaks of MRSA for it to happen. But yeah, so it's a bit of a mix of both. There is some elements of practice, which we're really getting on top of now, really going back to basics with the teams, going right back just to the chain of infection, just ensuring that our education is in line with the national IPC framework, education framework, and really just felt like we're sort of starting again, really. But it's definitely working. Those relationships between IPC and ward staff is much better. I don't think they fear us anymore, because I think they did. I think they felt threatened by us, that we were going to come in and point the finger and tell them what they were doing wrong, where it's much more of a collaborative approach now.
Hi. Can I ask a question? You said you had 2 outbreaks over an 8-year period, and then this happened. Did you do any reflection on how you got from there to there? And if so, what would you have done different today to make sure that didn't happen?
I think for me it's a bit tricky to answer, because I joined IPC just at the beginning of the pandemic, so I wasn't involved. I have a theatre background, so I worked in theatres for 13 years and then was redeployed to the infection control team. The team was 1 nurse for the whole trust, actually. So I don't have experience in those previous outbreaks. It was all quite new to me, really. I don't know if you can remember.
I think one of the things, if I was going to reflect on what we do differently now in terms of outbreaks in comparison to previous, is I recall sitting in one of the previous outbreak meetings, and it consisted of the IPC nurse. I, at the time, was actually admin within IPC. There would have been 1 facilities manager and maybe the chief nurse, and that would have been about it. That literally was the scope of review of what's happened. Whereas now, our outbreak meetings are absolutely multidisciplinary. You've got ward managers actually presenting their outbreak. That was probably one of the biggest changes. We presented 2 ward managers, so you would have a an outbreak, there might be an issue with cleaning, or even if it wasn't an outbreak, it could be just a period of increased infection, and the facilities manager would tell the ward manager what her cleaning scores were, whereas now we sit in our outbreak meetings or query outbreak meetings, and the ward manager presents the status of her ward back to the specialists. And that sounds like quite a simple switch of responsibility, but actually it's massive for us, because it's that accountability at ward level. It's their house. We're just there to advise on how they should clean it, but it's their house, so to speak. I
think one of the most helpful things that NHSE did for us, because we had a lot of intense support from them at the time when we were going through their naughty step period, as we called it, is that they held a masterclass for ward managers, department managers, matrons, the board, from ward to board, about what their responsibilities are for IPC. Because I think one of the biggest issues we had is that people thought that the IPC team did IPC and that it wasn't everyone's responsibility. And since people are much more clear on their responsibilities for IPC, I think people had a bit of a light bulb moment that actually I am responsible, and I need to be responsible for my own area, so that when I'm sat in an outbreak meeting, the ward managers are delivering the assurance rather than it always being us. And that's how it was before. It was very much the wrong people were giving the assurance, which is why I think we possibly stayed on that national oversight framework for longer than we expected, because they didn't have that assurance.
Do you find you review your processes more often now?
Absolutely. We've had a complete and utter revamp of all of our processes, and I would say that we are in a much better position and are showing that sustained improvement now. So we've done a lot of changing, but it's how we sustain it all. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kim. I'm the decontamination lead at the Dudley Group. My question is actually for the microbiologist. Absolutely brilliant presentation, thank you, as all of yours were. It was really about when you have water testing done, we may check for Pseudomonas, and then quite often we'll then do a review of the patients to see if we've had any Pseudomonas positives in that area. I know there's been some new guidance that's come out, the NETB, and that is suggesting that if you have positive patients, you then do the reverse, and you might then test the water for Pseudomonas or for Stenotrophomonas, which is what you were talking about before. Just wanted to what your thoughts were on that, and whether it's something that is worth doing, worth considering, as we're discussing it as part of the water safety group.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think it perplexes a lot of people. I think there's a few things. We concentrate very much Legionnaires, Pseudomonas, and there's some other organisms now which are probably more common than we think we're becoming aware of. But we test for Pseudomonas. So the first thing is, you can test, you might have other organisms there. So I think certainly from an infection control perspective, there's all these lists of opportunistic plumbing premise pathogens you need to put on your alert system, because you often, in the communities you get in water systems, biofilm, we're used to, when we get person-person transmission, just a single organism and a single clone. From the environment, you can get polymicrobial and polyclonal, because they're all breaking off from the biofilm. The initial guidance which came out from in Pseudomonas after the neonatal outbreak in Northern Ireland was you did 6 monthly testing. But, like usual guidance, no explanation where they picked the figure. And it's not as if we've got a written agreement with the bacteria that we test and you stay away for 5 months and 30 days. They just pick that out of the air. And this comes back to this blind following of guidance, which we've got to take risk-based approach. So I think you can do the water testing. What some people are saying now, if it's Pseudomonas, what you should do is you don't start at 6 months. Maybe you do it weekly. If it's clear, you extend, so you get to know your own water system. The problem is Pseudomonas can also come from drains. So we haven't set a baseline in adult ICUs as to what's an acceptable level of Pseudomonas. Because we're adults, we say that some of the patients will bring it in, and then you get this, you don't know what that is, and then people do get Pseudomonas, and it's always seems to be we're on the side of the bacteria in a sense. Oh, you know, the patient brought it in with them. Whereas in neonatal units, if you see a single Pseudomonas, that should be an alarm if they haven't been out of the hospital, because the neonate picks up its flora from the maternal birth canal. It's very unusual that mothers carry Pseudomonas. So we haven't got a baseline. So I think the other way to approach this is water testing is not a control measure. You know, you test it, it may be fine, and there's all sorts of things you can get wrong. If you take a post-flush sample for Pseudomonas, it can give you a false negative. The other way is to work with the clinical teams and look at the routes of transmission and block those. You know, that's probably the safer approach. And then I think what people are looking at now, we've opened in the UK the first water-free ITU down in Wexham. It's, you know, this is all, it's difficult for people to accept this because this is counterintuitive to, you know, we've had in the past, we've got a bit of wall space, put another sink in. You know, we're now realizing the risk. But if you're interested, it's worth going down there and seeing if it's something that suits you. And again, it needs this multidisciplinary approach, and it works when the clinical teams get ownership. That's what you've got to get, and often it's only meeting their opposite numbers you get it. So I think if people are interested in your area, I would start talking to the Wexham people. It takes about a year. It's not a cul-de-sac. If you go down it, you don't like it, you don't feel safe, you can come back, because you can just cover the sinks over to begin with. You've got to make sure they're flushed, but you do it. But what they've seen down there is, and it's quite interesting, one of the things that people throw up, them, you know, well, how are you going to manage C. diff, you know, in a critical care? Well, not many C. diff patients actually get onto critical care. And we've taught people hand washing. Actually, when you look at C. diff, the main control measure is not hand washing. In fact, there's studies which show where people use alcohol gel versus hand washing, it makes no difference to the transmission of C. diff. And in fact, alcohol gel may prevent other organisms at the same time. And the reason for that is because the contamination with C. diff is so widespread, you know, and we forget. The way we controlled C. diff in 2007, people were washing their hands, it's still spreading, it was deep cleans. And I think the emerging thing is we haven't been able to clean the environment. So you've got to address those risks and get people around there. But and there are, you know, if you want to use water, there's wipes, and there are new agents, which, you know, I think hypochlorous acid seems to be the in thing now. But you can get that in the hand to get around it. So I think your question's really actually very critical. And if you think through the different answers, and perhaps the eventual thing is to actually get rid of the sources as much as you can.
Follow-up question. You know the wipes that you can use in areas where you might not have access to sinks. What are your thoughts on those? Do you think that there is a place for them?
Yeah, like many things in life, these are a double-edged sword. So a couple of things with the wipes is that, I mean, so if you're giving somebody a bed bath, the conventional way we do it at the moment is you often get a pulp product. You plonk the pulp product down in the sink. You may acquire organisms, and certainly people know Ashley Flores down in King's College Hospital. She's done some work on this. She thinks this is how their CPs are being transmitted. Wipes, you've got to have, what you don't want them is going down the wastewater system because they lead to blockages. And the other thing is, wipes are another way of water getting in through the back door. And there have been, you know, international outbreaks linked to wipes contaminated at the manufacturer. So I think we need to strengthen up and I think part of the issue with wipes is people see bathing somebody is not a sterile procedure. It's not a sterile procedure, but the problem is if you've got lines in a patient and you start using these, now it becomes a high-risk scenario. And so it's not kind of in the right setting where it should be because these are seen as cosmetic products. We need to change this. But I think there is I think there is a way, but we need to think of the knock-on of the other things.
Hiya. Question for Emma. Is it? Hi, Susie from Doncaster Hospitals. So appreciate it's not an area that might affect everybody, but a service that doesn't seem represented particularly well in the cleaning standards is hospital accommodation. So obviously we have quite a portfolio, housing all sorts of staff, clinical staff from all sorts of backgrounds, and even just the communal areas aside, what we tend to find sometimes is poor standards of cleanliness in those personal areas. So in terms of cleaning, it's not an area that I would necessarily want to clean at an FR6 rating because it generates income. So from improving standards and experience, we want to improve that, but also from more of an IPC background where these are clinicians that are then going out and treating patients. Is there scope for that to be looked at?
Short answer, yes. Slightly longer answer, it is complicated because anything that we put into the standards as word could potentially have a financial impact. So there is a method that we look at things. Not everything makes it in. When we get to the sort of directors of finance across NHS England or DHSC or HM Treasury, there is always been the case where you as an organisation can choose to upgrade an FR rating. The recommendation is there to try and support organisations with funding, but there's always been the case that if you believe your accommodation areas are a source of revenue, it's an easy argument to go to your board and say, actually, this is the regularity with which we need to clean this. Done in conjunction, we've talked a lot today about the power of partnership. So with a multidisciplinary team, with your IPC colleagues, saying actually, yes, we've got staff living in these areas that are then going to treat patients, and we need to ensure that these areas are cleaned to the right, what we believe is the right standard, which you and your IPC colleagues and your estates colleagues can set and document the reasoning behind why you've set it at that FR category. You can't go below, but you can always go above.
A question for Dr. Weinbrunn. I am involved at the moment in my organisation where we're moving cleaning contractors, and we've had a lot of discussion around robotics and automated machinery, and I was just interested in your reference to the robotic scrubbing machine and the risks of contamination. I just wondered whether you might be able to comment a bit more about that, and also are there any particular references, papers that we might be able to go and look at further?
Thank you for that. There is information coming out on that. I can point you to some papers which have highlighted it. What part of the country are you in? London. Okay. Well, and I can give you the names of some people to speak to. So they've had to go, and do you want to grab me afterwards? I don't know the full answers to this, but it is an emerging area.